If everyone on the commission says yes to a Tesla, we each get one.
Yeah. Oh, that might be.
It's a joke.
Kate, Arnie, are we expecting Nick and
We are
Matt?
not expecting Nick, and we are likely not expecting Matt also. There's
Oh,
a
okay.
possibility he could show.
The music in Boxwood tomorrow.
No, tomorrow's a week off. We're gonna be back on July 22nd.
This is the dog day.
Yeah, there's nothing in Lime Kiln this weekend
Yeah,
either.
live, no live. And that one in the kids are away. I was like, do something. I'm sitting here, I was like, what? Friday live.
Yeah, well, we got canceled. We were supposed to have music last Friday. It got canceled.
Oh,
So there was a threat of rain, a strong threat, but then it never rained. Unlucky.
wasn't around last week.
All right, I have 5 p.m. on the clock. I'd like to call to order the July 14th meeting of the Lexington Planning Commission. And the next item on the agenda will be to approve the agenda as written. Do we have any comments before we make a motion? Anyone want to make a motion?
I move to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
All right. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. The next item will be the approval of the minutes from June 23rd. And there's an asterisk. What's the asterisk? Oh, it is attached. Gotcha.
I move to approve the minutes as presented. Oh, sorry, you weren't asking yet.
Oh, no, I'm, thank you. That motion sounds good. I think, I don't have any other comments. Any second?
I'll second.
Further discussion? I'll say that I was not at the meeting on June 23rd, but I did read the minutes and approve as written. All in favor of approving the agenda, or sorry, approving the minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Next item is item 4, citizens' comments on matters not on the agenda. Do we have anybody here that would like to speak up? No? Okay. Let's move to item number 5, new business. First item of new business is to elect the chairperson for the upcoming year. It's a July to June term. Is that correct? Or
Right.
okay. Do we have any nominations for electing a chairperson?
I nominate Blake Chester for our next chairperson.
I'll second that.
We'll third it if we could.
All right. Do I vote on myself being nominated, or do I abstain from this?
How do you feel about yourself?
You can only vote yes.
No real direction.
Yeah.
Bylaws.
I
All right.
voted for myself and it was my choice. So
All right. Any discussion other than that? We have a motion and a second. I will say that I appreciate your faith and confidence in me to be the future chairperson. So I accept the nomination. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, including me. Thank you very much. I will hope to do as good a job as all the preceding folks that I've witnessed do it, such as Pat, John, and Jamie since I've been on. So you all have set a high standard and high bar. Okay, item B, electing a vice chairperson.
I know-
Nominations.
Oh, I nominate Nick Betts, and I did talk to him and he would accept if he's nominated.
Second.
All right, any discussion? No? All right. All in favor of Nick Betts being the new vice chairperson?
I,
All right. That sounds great. All right. So with that said, we do not need to change the position of the chairperson since that will remain me. Arnie had warned that I potentially would have to, let the next chairperson take the spot, but that is me. So we're going to move to item C. The next item of new business is ECCOA 2022-01, an application by Lloyd Mccarthy, Dewberry Engineers Incorporated for Tesla Incorporated for the installation of a Tesla electric vehicle charging station with 8 charging posts and new signage at the Sheets location at 600 East Nelson Street.
Mr. Chair, staff would recommend that you also open up the site plan application for the same property so that we can hold the staff report, the applicant statement, public comment, and commission discussion all together.
Great. I agree. I think that sounds like a good idea. Let's also open up item D, which is site plan 2022-01, which is the same thing I just said, but it's a site plan.
We do have a request for a certificate of appropriateness for the installation of a Tesla electric vehicle charging station with 8 illuminated charging posts and associated equipment at the Sheets location at 600 East Nelson Street. The parcel is located in the C2 zoning district and also in the entrance corridor overlay district. On the top of, or in that middle portion of page 1 of your staff report, it lists out basically that you have 6 parking spaces. They're going to be expanded so that the 6 become 8. And it's in that location at the southeast corner of the parking lot where there are currently 6 spaces located between a dumpster and the air compressor and the LP gas sort of cabinet, if you're familiar with the property. So there's really not terribly much changing as far as site design or architecture, but there is a requirement for entrance corridor for any improvements. And that's why you're being asked for an entrance corridor certificate of appropriateness. On the second page, we did go to a fairly nearby location where existing Tesla charging station is located just out in the county. And that will give you an idea, at least at nighttime, what it will look like when it's lit up. I believe we're a little bit fortunate in that this location is up against the bypass off ramp, no residential uses, dwellings at all in a vicinity. And that leads me to mention that John Knox did stop by to take a look at the application, and he did not return with any comments. And he is the closest person, but I doubt from his vantage point, he would even be able to see these because the uphill nature and the retaining wall that's on the backside of Sheets. So I really doubt he'd even have a sight line to this particular portion of the property. That's all I have for the, maybe I should go through. Over on page 4, where we have your standards for landscaping, signage, architecture, site planning, and lighting, staff will say that in my opinion, that the landscaping standards are not applicable in this case because the existing landscaping is going to be ripped out. They're going to do the construction and they're going to put that hedge right back in. So it's not really an issue of reviewing landscaping or additional landscaping. Signage standards are applicable because there is additional signage being proposed. It is more than the 3 minor signs that would keep you from having to go get a permit. So a permit does need to be issued. So your approval of this entrance corridor in effect approves the signage portion of the request. The architecture standards do apply. There's a wall with 2 sides to hide the equipment cabinets that are required for this. The 3rd side is the back side of the dumpster, and that wall will match up with the brick that's there for the dumpster. Site planning design is applicable. There's only minor changes. A couple of curbs are being removed. This is being extended or widened a little bit. Curbs are being put back in. Going on to lighting standards, the 2 lampposts that are there need to be removed because of the widening of the area, and they're going to be put back in a very close location to where they are now. All that said, staff does make a recommendation in favor of the proposal because the parcel is highly visible from East Nelson, but not from to this portion of the property. It is visible from the bypass only. Proposed improvements do not appear to be in conflict with the entrance corridor design standards, and staff recommends approval. The proposed charging station also meets a comprehensive plan strategy, which is TR 2.3, to support the development and siting of e-vehicle charging stations and facilities to assist with the transition to lower emission vehicle use. Happy to answer any questions on the entrance corridor before we get into the staff report for the site plan.
Just so I understand, so there's two landscape medians on either side of the parking area. So they're going to just use part of each of those? You said because they're going to put back the hedges. I wasn't sure otherwise how they're going to put back hedges.
If we go to page 17 of the packet, and only have one unfortunately, we only have one copy of LEVMI 17. If you'd like to take a look at it, if it helps in a larger size. So this is gonna be hard, but this is just being brought over. The hedge that's already behind is just gonna be taken out. They're gonna put all the electrical and the curb and whatnot that they have to do, and then the hedge goes right back.
Okay, I was thinking you were talking about the bushes in those median, the raised strip, but that whole thing will probably disappear then to make those two extra parking lot. Well, I guess or should I wait till the applicant makes a statement?
Are you talking to both the left and right hand side of the existing parking spaces?
Right.
I'm not sure that there's terribly much landscaping in those two locations.
Yeah,
It's
there's not
more
a whole
hedge on the
lot.
backside where you head in. So
Yeah.
the head in portion there's on to protect from the view from the bypass, but I don't believe there's much left and right.
Okay, so those two strips of grass with a little bit of bush, those will be removed to make those two extra spaces. Okay, that was the
Yeah.
only thing I wasn't.
Some minor detail, but along the same lines, I believe the spaces are now 10 feet wide. The new spaces are going to be 9 feet wide. So it's
Okay.
not too brand new. It's a little bit bigger to accommodate 8 total.
Yeah, that was, I was more curious how to go from 6 to 8.
Yeah.
Arnie, along the same lines, I don't need the drawing, but so is this where the current trash receptacle is, and this is the new area where
You are correct. That 3-sided item is where the trash receptacle, and you don't see the whole thing, and it does have a gate on the front, so it is well designed to hide the dumpster. And then on the back side of that wall for the dumpster, there's going to be a wall with 2 sides that will then provide what I'm calling a corral, but in a space that will be hidden behind those walls, those 3 walls that I just mentioned, for the additional electrical equipment. I'm going to call it stuff that's needed to take the voltage at whatever it is to bring it down to feed the 2 things that then go to the 4 electrical vehicle charging posts.
how tall are those? Is that
That wall is 6 feet in height.
okay?
Is this a time where we're just asking you questions? We're not asking the applicant questions? Is that, or we wait?
If
for
you
now?
don't mind just asking me questions on this one, and then if you don't have any more, I'll go over the site plan.
Yeah,
And if
sure.
you like, then we can bring the applicant up to answer questions for both.
Sounds good.
Any more questions on the entrance corridor specifically? Okay, going over to the site plan. Again, there's not terribly much being enlarged as far as construction goes. So we did provide for you the same background material, a location map, and then getting on to page 2 of your staff report, talking about the zoning requirements, the proposed site design, the setbacks, which there aren't any because it's not adjacent to a residential zoning district. Parking standards, they're actually increasing by 2. Screening requirements, so that, and we've gone over that not too terribly long ago about ground-based utility equipment and the screening needed for that. Public Works, building official, fire protection, and police have no comments. And then in the middle portion of page 3, those are your criteria. So the site plan shall be approved by the planning commission if it is found to be adequate with respect to those 8 items. Staff doesn't make a recommendation for approval. Happy to answer any questions. Perhaps the best way, if we go to pages 26 and 27, I'd hope that these would actually end up being landscape, but they didn't. So you can at least see, even though it's a little bit light, you can see the existing conditions, and then side by side, if you look at the 2 pages and match them, you can sort of get an understanding of what is being proposed. Again, 6 spaces being increased to 8 is essentially the request.
In the site plan on page 2 of 3, where you say parking, it says 2 additional off-street parking spaces are included. Is that just basically going from 6 to 8? But these are they considered parking spaces, even though they're charging stations? They're considered parking spaces.
That's the interesting thing. And I sort of struggled a little bit trying to consider how to count these. Are they generating parking demand, but they're also going to be customers of the store because you're going to be there for a minimum of 20 minutes, 30 minutes probably. So they're going to be customers as well. So how do you count them? There's also we talked about enabled parking. So there'll be 2 signs up. One says 10-minute general parking for 4 of them. I don't know which 4, the left 4, the right 4, if they mix every other one. And then the other 4 will have a Tesla vehicle charging only sign, but there will be no enforcement of that.
So, okay. So even like Sheetz employees don't enforce it? Okay.
That's my understanding. Talking to the applicant, and we do have a representative here too for answering those questions, but there's really no way. The city's not going to enforce that. And I don't believe Sheetz is going to either. And then Tesla certainly won't be in the area to do it. So it's a little bit hard to, how do you consider the parking? We don't have clear direction in our parking standards. Not that I'm suggesting we amend the parking standards, but we are adding to, and folks that don't have a Tesla can still park there, and it suggests that you park there for only 10 minutes at a time. And again, most people that are going to charge are probably going to go in and buy something, so they're going to be customers as well.
Gotcha. So so I'm clear that these charging stations, they're being put in, they're not actually owned by Sheetz. Like this is just going on that property, but they're okay. So that it's not their business. Gotcha.
It's an accessory use to the gasoline station.
Do we have any more questions of Arnie before we go to an applicant statement?
No.
Would you like to come up and present a statement, and please include your name and address for the record?
Hi, my name is Ton Tran. I'm a representative of Tesla here for the 600E Nelson Street Tesla's charging station. Previously mentioned, we are installing 8 charging stations, widening 6 parking stalls to 8 stalls. So I'm here with any questions. I also brought a photo simulation of what the charging station will look like if you guys are interested.
Do these parking spaces change the access or location of the air compressor? Look, that's right next, that's going to be adjacent to that. These.
No, it does not.
And just so I could ask, you heard me asking before we got started, can only Tesla cars use these for charging, or will someday they be adaptable to other electric cars? I mean,
We do have plans to open up the network in North America. Right now, it's only available in Europe. But within the next 1 or 2 years, we are opening up the network to every single EV users.
it's interesting. Yeah, I was just wondering how that, in terms of adapters and what you're using.
our adapters will be, it will be with, the charging post
Yeah.
itself.
Thank you. And obviously Sheets has signed off on this. You have an agreement. There's
Yes,
this
we
agreement
do
with
have
them
a
and
lease agreement with Sheets. We are approved by them and we also are approved by the electrical provider as well. So we have a plan with them. Easement are signed. The last thing we need is the building
Right.
permit.
okay, good. Thank you.
Do you know what other Tesla charging stations are in this area?
I believe there's one other one that gets a pretty good amount of usage, but I don't remember the store or address.
I think it's near
Well,
Applebee's.
Yeah, we're what, Applebee's?
Is it at the hotel?
It's somewhere in the, yeah.
Two hotels behind the Applebee's and it's in the parking lot. I guess it's shared by the two, but that's what the photographs that are in here are
Okay.
from that location.
Okay.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Is there any public comment on the COA or site plan? It looks like no. So let's move to commission discussion and decision for both items. And then do we make a motion simultaneously for both, or do we do it?
It'd be preferable if the entrance corridor certificate of appropriateness was dealt with separately and first.
Okay. All right, well, I feel like we could probably have a discussion and decision, or a discussion at least for both simultaneously.
I think it's a great addition to Lexington, and as Pat brought up, in the future, when there is more a universal charging station, that'll be an even bigger benefit. We're glad to have Tesla here in providing the charging stations.
Yeah, this is a nice one to approve.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, then I'll go ahead and make a motion. I move to approve the entrance corridor certificate of appropriateness application EC 2022-01 for the installation of a Tesla electric vehicle charging station with 8 charging posts and associated equipment and signage at 600 East Nelson Street as proposed by the applicant.
A second.
All right, we have a second. Any further comment or discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right. That motion passes for the certificate of appropriateness, and let's talk about the site plan. Any other further discussion before we have a motion?
I appreciated it was good to see the site plan. Thank you for bringing that graphic. That was
Yeah.
helpful to see it. And I think they've done a good job in fitting it into that area. And it's a good location, also well thought through. So if we want to move to a motion.
Yeah.
Okay, I move to approve site plan number SP 2022-01 and find the submitted site plan to be in compliance with the zoning ordinance.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Both motions have passed. Thank you very much.
Good luck.
All right. Next item is,
Was this his, Arnie?
oh
Or
yeah,
yours?
this might be his if he wants it back. I don't know if he wants it back.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to the next item on the agenda is our annual zoning ordinance amendments. Item E is ZOA 2021-04, Plan Unit Development, continued discussion. Arnie, where are we at? What are we accomplishing today?
we are so close to having our first full review of the item. There were a couple of things that we didn't quite get to. As you see from pages 29 and on, everything basically that is in italics, whereas italicized are your amendments suggested from the last meeting. So if we could finalize the first run through and then perhaps go back and answer any questions that you have. John has something to hand out and make some suggestions as well. If I'm not mistaken, if we could go to page 6 of 8. In the application for rezoning section, we, at some point, we're making our way through that section, and then we also jumped around a little bit. But I'll just leave it open to you if you have any specific questions from the application section, which is 5.13 on through 5.14. Again, at that last meeting, we weren't so linear as to finish out and sort of jumped around a bit. So I just want to make sure that if you have any questions in those last two sections, that we address those. And once we get through that, then we'll talk about what your next steps may be if you want to, if you're ready, or if you want another review period and one more meeting before you advertise for a work session. Because I think that was your direction last time, not for a public hearing, but I think you desired a work session.
Yeah. As an aside, Arnie, I when I was writing up these notes, I was thinking, would it be a good practice for us to, once we get a final version, to ask the county to take a look at it, and also maybe even Tom Roberts at BV, since they're two good planners, and just to have their review of it.
We can certainly pass it along and ask for a review.
I think that would be helpful.
Oh.
So what you've done here on page 7 of 8 is update. This reflects a discussion we had, right?
Correct. If you're talking about D in particular,
Yes.
there's a mistake in there. Obviously, I did a cut and paste to bring forward the institutional overlay, and that shouldn't be institutional district. That should be PDMU, just as a. And I'm sorry, I'm in D1 in the middle of that. Because again, we were trying to bring forward some language from the institutional overlay. And unfortunately, the words institutional district slipped in there where it actually should be PD-MU.
And when we're done with this, there were just a couple of questions I had. I know, I'm sorry, I missed the last meeting about before items.
If there are no questions in 5.12 or 5.13, we'll just open it up for a review of anything else.
I did bring up the last time, and that is there a way, I mean, what is the process by which this is presented to the city and the approval process? And I know it's in here. I guess what I'm getting at is thinking through, is there a way that, or language we can ask for in here that would encourage a proposal to be preliminary plan be presented before we, because normally we don't see it until close to the end. So is there a way that we can get some feedback to a developer on the development before it goes too far down the design process?
Possibly. I'm trying to figure out how that would work, because what we're really asking for is a full design so that we're really at a site plan level. And then, so they are having to put in a good bit of effort to get to that point. And would it be helpful to them as well to have some sort of initial, and we could maybe borrow some of the language that we have in our preliminary subdivisions versus our final subdivision and break it down potentially into a two-part if that's your desire.
I would encourage that we think about that we find language for that because and it's for both the developer and the public sake. So that you don't get way down the road and you haven't had any feedback. So and I
Okay.
think there's other examples of kind of the language around a preliminary review or preliminary master planners. I don't know how others feel about that.
I mean, I think that on the other side of the coin, the hope is that what we put together here is sufficient for them, that if they follow what is laid out here, they will be, within the, parameters that we're looking for. But
That would be within the regulatory parameters. There's what's actually being looked at on the design of it. And would there be any comments on the design aspects or the layout?
I know we always run into that problem in Lexington. I'm going to take it from the different standpoint is we don't get to design other people's projects. I mean, we put in the parameters, they can design within this. It'll go much smoother if they do get public buy-in early on, but nobody is beholden to design, to allow us to design or public to design their projects.
Oh, that's clear, Leslie. I think it's an opportunity, if it's written well and done well, where the developer can present the initial ideas and get feedback from the public. You're not asking for an approval in that process. Well, maybe if we could just ask Arnie to explore some language on that and how it could be inserted.
And
I don't.
perhaps there's an opportunity just to make, if a developer so chooses, he could avail himself of that option and not make it a mandatory thing, perhaps. And if I
Well-
could ask Kate one question, because Kate did more of the research about the other PUDs and heights and all. Do you recall any other ones having a two-step process? Okay.
And
We
they're
have not
gonna,
come across that.
they're gonna want to sell this to us if they're gonna have to rezone it.
Yeah.
So
And
that's
I appreciate
necessary.
Arnie's comment because actually, when I was thinking about it today, the language in here, if we want to insert something like that, is the developer is encouraged to, but not required to hold public meetings prior. Because within the design principles of the comp plan, we have some language to that effect.
And can we leave it at that point then? We find a place in the beginning of this to make it obvious that developer is encouraged to hold public hearings prior to submittal of a PDMU master plan.
Yeah, I mean, here it is. And I wrote encourage to. So if you look on the land use design principles at the very end of the packet,
6.
it says in there, in the second paragraph, second sentence of the second paragraph, the planning process should begin with a community discussion to identify specific development goals for each area and assess the needs for additional guidance on planning, et cetera, et cetera. And I wrote in the margin encouraged to. So it's something where you could encourage them, you're not requiring them to do it. And actually, if we include the design principles language, which I suggested to you all, then in a way, it's already in there. The principles in there of the community meeting.
Yeah, I think if the idea, I think what you're trying to do also is make sure we're referencing the comprehensive plan and staying close to it. And so if you, the idea of carrying forward that language or even referencing the fact that we had addressed this very thing in the comprehensive plan, we addressed these areas and that is encouraged. And I think that's probably a good idea.
So if we, going back to the character of development, if you all, based on the discussion, agree that some language that doesn't have to be what I suggested, but something along that line, that the Lexington Comprehensive Plan includes design principles for opportunity areas and mixed-use neighborhoods and should inform the character of development. And inform is a word that gives you a lot of flexibility. A proposal for planned unit mixed-use district should also incorporate many of the following characteristics, ... which is what Arnie's list has.
The only thing about including mixed-use neighborhoods is what we've said earlier on is that this is in the C2 area, which is our commercial district. It's not our mixed-use neighborhoods. I would see mixed-use neighborhoods being more around City Hall, that type of development, rather than in the commercial C2 area.
Not the way the design principles are written, Leslie. If you look at the last page, and in essence, we are talking, I mean, it's a matter of wording. Mixed-use district we're talking about is a mixed-use neighborhood.
Right, mixed-use districts are transitional areas. This is our commercial area. I mean, it is C2 that we're specifying. So that's my only concern about trying to make it. We should be careful about using too much from the mixed-use neighborhoods, because that's not really what this area is. It's our commercial
Can you
district.
look at that? Look at those design principles and tell me whether you think those are an impediment to a developer in a C2.
Right, but I think though, I mean, I think we are specifically talking about these two particular opportunity areas. So I think we just stick with, I think what Leslie's saying is we don't want to reference mixed use neighborhood because that's a different part of town or different.
But again, I'm sorry, I'm going to be a little stubborn here. Take a look at that. Read that paragraph, those 3 paragraphs. What do you find in there that would limit a C2, a mixed use district in the C2? These are design principles. We're not saying you
I
have
see.
to do them. We're saying these are the principles that we think reflect a mixed use neighborhood.
All right,
We
okay.
call it
You're just talking about mining this for some ideas,
That's right.
no, but not referencing, because we were just, maybe I'm a little confused about what you're proposing or what you're suggesting.
Well, I was suggesting that when you say includes design principles for opportunity areas and mixed use neighborhoods that should inform the character of development. You're just saying to a developer, we have thought through design principles that apply to mixed use and the opportunity areas.
But I would say it doesn't really fit. I mean, it's talking about having structures next to each other. Commercial and residential uses may be located in adjacent separate structures or in singles. I guess it does say single
Yeah,
structures.
no,
that
that's why
included.
I don't find it to be that. I wouldn't find this limiting to a developer. Arnie, do you have any thoughts on it?
Not yet.
Okay.
Yeah, having read through it again, nothing jumps out at me that would make me worried about the design principles being used
Yeah.
for what we're doing in the C2 areas.
It just means that a developer would have to go read them.
That's fine. It's not a mixed use area really, but that's fine. I mean, I just don't want to lose sight that it really is our commercial area. And that was why we don't allow housing in there as it is just under our regular zoning. So I just think we have to be, it has to be a really good project for us to allow to rezone it to the PUD mixed use.
Well, that brings up another question, which I just, my note to myself and to remember to say to all of you is on the mixture of uses. So the existing language that we are looking at says, references the goals and strategies recommended in the comprehensive plan. And so Arnie, I was just wondering, is that what, is that specific enough? Is that, or too general? I'm not quite sure.
We could, as we're going through these items, if we could sort of have an indication of whether or not you're in agreement with the changes or not, because I
Okay,
think I'm gonna lose my place and
I-
I've
no,
already
I
lost my
agree.
place. Because we've already talked about this character development about the mixed use neighborhoods. Is that something as proposed language in John's submittal or extra handout here? Is that something you would like to leave in? Leave in the opportunity areas and mixed use neighborhoods?
You're right. Apologies for jumping. The reason I did it is it goes to Leslie's question, but you're right. Let's talk about, let's sort the character development for you.
And there was an item right before that that I've already lost my place.
Encouraging developers to have
Oh,
public.
yeah, that idea, if we want to put in that sentence of encouraging the applicant or developers to hold public hearings prior to submittal of a PDMU application. Is that something that you would like to place in the code, either perhaps in the intent or in this character of development section?
I think so. Would we call it a public meeting or what would we call it? Encourage them to have a public hearing. It wouldn't be a public.
It's not a
Public
hearing.
meetings, let's
Public
stay
meeting.
away from the hearing.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it
But
would be a meeting.
But in general, yeah, in general, I think if I think that would be a good idea.
Right.
Like a
Would you
public forum,
Yeah.
maybe?
Okay. So we'll insert some language. Again, I'm not sure if you have an opinion right at the moment, if it goes into your intent section or in the character development that will, the developer or the applicant, one or the other, is encouraged to hold public meetings or public forums prior to submittal of a PDMU rezoning application.
Yeah, would you, would it fit under the application for rezoning, that section which outlines the process?
Yeah, I think you have some choices. And I don't see in the three that we have mentioned so far, I don't see a bad one in either one of those, honestly.
Well,
And maybe a little bit more appropriate in the application section. I think she'll find out. Or maybe before that. So in 513A, instead of saying the applicant shall file an application for rezoning, prior to submittal, the applicant is encouraged to hold public hearings or meetings, sorry, not hearings.
Mhm.
So maybe that's an acceptable place to put it for now.
So-
You'll have another review, certainly.
Yeah, I think so.
Yep.
And basically with the Spotswood thing, the first time they came to town, we had public meetings, didn't we? With the first
Line.
proposal, where
I mean,
where the very first proposal where there was gonna be, proposing 5-story.
Yeah.
Didn't we
Right,
have some
right,
public, didn't we
yes.
have some open public meetings?
Or
Pardon me? Four, right.
meetings.
Like, so I mean, that's kind of what you're thinking about, right? Is, if someone comes to town and says, okay, I think that's what we're thinking about. And
There were Zoom meetings.
they were Zoom meetings. Yeah, we were deep into. But I think that's what you're thinking about, that sort of thing, right, John?
yes.
Okay, it seems like we have that
Yeah.
squared away for
Yeah,
now.
and I think that's a good place to put it. You think in the application process.
Yeah.
Section.
And then
Yeah.
going back to the character development and looking at what we have there in our multicolored display, and matching that with what John has proposed, is there a preference for what John has proposed, which includes the mixed use neighborhood language? Again, just grabbing the design principles from mixed use neighborhood.
That's fine.
Yeah, I'm good with that. I think I might have misunderstood a little bit what John was getting at there. So, but I think that makes sense.
And if you don't mind, I may add something because the sentence says Lexington's comprehensive plan includes design principles for opportunity areas and mixed use neighborhoods that should inform the character and development of the proposed project or so
Yeah,
that it just
yeah.
kind of targets it back to what we're actually trying to do.
No, whatever you can do to improve that language, Arnie, please. I was trying to scribble it in the side of my margins and I realized I'd never get it straight, so I went to the computer.
Okay, I'm sorry, that catches us up to whatever the third item was that we were about to start.
I had jumped to, because it goes back to Leslie's question, I think it's an important one, is the mixture of uses. So the sentence that we have, let's be specific. On page 3 of 8 of page 30. Whichever one. So mixture of uses. A variety of housing types and non-residential uses are strongly encouraged. The mixture of uses shall be based on the uses, goals, and strategies recommended in the comprehensive plan. And, does that, I wasn't quite sure what that refers to. I mean, that's rather broad, uses, goals, and strategies. And maybe it's okay to be that broad, but. And then Leslie, going to your question, if we're doing this, now it's clarified, as of the last meeting, it's in C2, then what would be your desired mix of residential, commercial, and if you notice in the Arnie in the previous packet had given us, or in this one too, there's lots of examples.
Mhm.
So, and Arnie and Kate highlighted them. Yeah, so on page 51, land uses. So Harrisonburg has 15% open space, 5% retail, employment, and then residential, not less than 15, not more than 80. So, and then on through every one of the examples we have.
I would honestly say I don't think having a table like that is helpful.
No, but it goes back to what I'm asking the question just trying to think through what you asked. So we're talking about in a C2 zone.
Right.
So what are we looking for in terms of residential in a C2 zone? Or do we really care?
I think that's it. I think we want to see a good proposal and we're open
Mhm.
to a good proposal and what the needs are at the time.
Arnie, have you had a chance to talk to any of the planners in some of these ones that you're citing?
We found the regulations. If you're now talking about specifically the residential requirements, no.
Yeah, I'm just
Found
wondering.
the requirements and then it's, a question of whether or not, and I believe at the last meeting, we did not come to an agreement that
No.
there should be,
Just to
Percentage.
clarify that there was a request 2 meetings ago
Yes.
to find out if there were requirements in other jurisdictions for a minimum residential component.
Yeah.
And that's why
Right. Thank you for the research. Because it's helpful right now. And I'm just trying to, I agree that we want maximum flexibility. And my only concern, and that can be dealt with in the second part of it, is the open space, but if other members of the commission agreed, I think it would be helpful for Arnie to maybe call just a couple of the people in Harrisonburg and others and ask them what their experience has been with that. And is it better to state a mix or not to state a mix? I'm just curious, to get their own experience.
The only thing is Harrisonburg is so different than we are. I mean, they are needing housing because of JMU. That's a,
Right.
big
Yeah.
driving force. They have plenty of, their commercial district is pretty large and some of it is undeveloped, whereas we don't have any, significant tracts of undeveloped land. So they have more flexibility and a higher housing. I mean, we have a high housing demand. We just don't have enough land to meet it.
So if we have a high housing demand, we don't have enough land, then we might want to encourage, say, 45% of the proposal should include housing.
But I don't think so. See, I mean, even just when came on council, it was don't touch the C2 district. As far as housing, that's why we don't allow when we went through the last zoning ordinance, it was, we don't have enough commercial space either. We're trying to find a balance, but if we could get a good project that combines the two and you're building up, give permission to build up to accommodate both, then I think that's a good plan. I don't know that I'm ready to put percentages with any kind of confidence that it makes sense to put a percentage.
Well, I agree on choosing percentages with confidence, and I don't have them yet. That's why I'm saying if there's any chance to do some additional research on what makes sense. And it has to be tuned in the end of the day to hear. But my own experience is that the more predictability you can provide a developer, the better. They know what they're walking into rather than a kind of, well, you do whatever you want and we'll tell you whether we like it. Sometimes that makes them nervous.
I would say, I think in terms of percentages, I think when we were talking about open space, I think we kind of felt like we're dealing compared to with most of these other locales with such a small area, talking about 3-5 acres tops, that I think we felt like it's just too small an area to be demanding a certain amount of open space. I think, right. I think that's that was in proportion to and I think I would say that there's a similar difficulty in trying to pin down what's the proper ratio between residential and commercial in one of these things, because it is such a small area that I just don't know how you're going to decide in such a small pie, how you're going to slice that and how it's not going to be arbitrary. And I think if we say it's pretty much got to be mixed. We're looking for residential, we're looking for commercial. I think, now, of course, I'm not a developer and I don't know the business of it, which one they're going to say, well, I'm going to make more money on this and this. I'm going to have less housing because I'll make less money or more commercial. That's kind of the question that they're going to be balancing, I think, is where am I going to make the most money? But if we're saying you've got to have some of both pretty much, then they're going to have to put in enough that would make it viable for them. So I'm hesitant, like looking through all of the examples of the percentage, I think it'd be really hard to
Well,
do.
you choose the percentages for a reason, and if we're not confident in the reason and want to have total flexibility, then you see what you get. And so we can, okay, why don't we park that one? And move on to the next one that I raised, that no one will like, which is, do we want a minimum of open space? And Pat, you just said what you think.
But did we talk about, so the permitted uses, did you want to talk about that? Were you
We could,
concerned
maybe
about,
that's the easier one, yeah.
were you concerned about, if we take because it pretty much says anything that's allowed in C2 is
No,
allowed, right?
it's more than that.
Plus, it's allowed anywhere, whatever's
Oh,
allowed anywhere in the
anywhere.
city.
So that's why.
So you want to know, are there any that jump out at you as, oh my gosh, that we missed that one, like.
I think as a commission, we should look at the matrix and say, are we in agreement? That's all. I think that's a big one. It's a big statement to accept. It was written in 2017. I think now's a chance to look at it again. We want total flexibility. We'll probably agree with what's there, but I think we should cast our eyes on that matrix before we put in that big statement.
You also have a little bit of language in 5.3 that says all those uses in residential, commercial, and industrial may be permitted. Additional uses enumerated and specific uses may also be excluded. So just because they propose it doesn't mean you have to accept it. So it's giving them a wide latitude on what permitted uses they may be able to choose from. Just because they propose a use that is permitted in C2 for that particular property doesn't mean that you have to approve it. This is a legislative act, so you have a wide leeway in that act or deciding on that act.
For our next meeting, can we just have a handout of the matrix?
I mean, it could just be a homework assignment for
It's a
everybody.
homework.
And if anything jumps out at you as, oh, no, I didn't think of that one. We could,
We'll send that tomorrow. That's
Okay.
easy enough to do.
Okay,
that was easy.
that was
Just
easy.
kick it down the road.
Open space, so I just, in rereading this today, see that Harrisonburg had 15%. And so did the others. The others had 10, 5. And I'm of two minds, as usual. I've seen cases and designs where if you have utterly useless open space, that meets the percentage requirement. And so on the other hand, I'm trying to understand, well, if you don't have anything in there, then a developer might not have, really might give you such a super dense development that there's no open space, which is important and healthy for people and even our green infrastructure. So that's my struggle with that one, with not putting anything in there.
I mean, again, we're a city, it's in the commercial areas. We do have designated open space throughout the city. We actually have a pretty good portion of designated open space throughout the city, especially when you take in consideration the trails. I guess I think they're going to design it to make it as attractive as possible to their clientele or tenants, whoever it is. So I guess I'm not as worried about putting a number there. And
is there what open space that's there currently that is, I don't know, fruitful or well-used open space would we be losing?
None.
No,
yeah.
right. So in other words, we're not talking about paving over,
No, you're talking about improving. the
improving.
space.
Yeah. Right. So, I mean, that's why I'm not too concerned. I think what we're talking about is it would be an improvement over. That's what I'm wondering. I think on our previous discussions, we thought it's such a small parcel that we're not looking for this as a way to improve green infrastructure, for instance, but we're looking for, and we put in language about, I don't know, environmentally sensitive building and design and so forth.
Mhm.
So that's where I am on the open space.
Your PAS memo that we summarized the first two chapters, somewhere in those first two chapters, also cautioned against trying to save something where you really have no natural features that's worth saving. And I think, I can't think of anything, maybe a tree here or there, but for the most part, we really have no natural features that I would consider to be worth saving and therefore necessarily needing an open space requirement.
I'm thinking some of these newer developments that you see where the retail, and it's usually in larger cities, the retail is on the front, on the main drag, and then you drive in behind, and then all of a sudden there's a residential development, and they try to make it look like a European street with cafes on the ground floor. But it still feels very, very car oriented in there and very dense development. And I think that's what we'd be getting. I don't think we'd be getting anything where there would be an open space for, people to gather.
Well,
And
I'll just add that you all are 100% correct that if you make a quota that you have to have a bare minimum open space, it could just be wasted space, but it could also be aspirational and it could be something positive for the residents that live there. For other people, whether it's an urban garden, a little public dog park for people to take their dog, there could potentially be good things. And so that maybe we don't need to say that there's a mandate, but again, one of those situations where we encourage innovative or interesting ideas for, because that does provide a public good for the people that are in that space. But again, it ultimately would depend on what the surrounding areas that, if there's other public parks that are nearby or if there's other things. But I was just in Denver this past few days and we were, in downtown condos and there's little urban gardens right at the foot of buildings that are they're cool. And I'm sure that the developer could have used that space to put in a few more units, but instead there's open space and it's at least, it's just an idea. But I agree. I don't know if we need to force it other than just to maybe, hopefully it's aspirational and part of the, the developer would hopefully want to make something appealing to the people that are using the building or using the.
Just as a reaction to a statement that John had about being car oriented, because this is going to be a piecemeal development, I think that's exactly what we're going to get. And I don't mean that, unless somebody buys up large chunks of property and then completely transforms it into a downtown type situation, I think we are most likely going to get exactly what you described, a car oriented. That's what we have now. And it may be a bit better with some open space provided without a requirement, with residential units. But I really have a hard time seeing those two areas being other than something that's car dominant in the near future, and maybe in the distant future.
Well, we give all this language in the beginning to say we don't want that.
But the goal is also to get, they are close enough to, we're in Lexington, so it's small, and part of the challenge or goal would be to make it easy to get in and out of there by foot or by bike if you chose to do so. And that's also part of it. And make it so that you can walk out of that development onto a reasonable sidewalk to get downtown.
We're also fortunate that both of the areas that we're talking about has open space nearby. And if we're talking about South Main, we have the middle school there. That's open space. They have open space there that would be available for
Yeah.
folks in the backside of, not New Market, Evergreen Place. We have the cemeteries open space. We have the elementary school that's open space. And then to Pat's point, if you're on the other side of East Nelson, you have the ability to walk Walker Street or Miller Street to be able to get into something a little bit less dense if you so desire.
So that's helpful. And it goes back to Leslie's point about, there's trails and then you're explaining larger open space. I guess I'm going back. What I've been struggling with is that some developments I've seen, and Blake just gave an example from his visit, where there's smaller spaces. You're really designing smaller public spaces within the development that for the benefit of the residents. And how do you kind of encourage that? And we have something in here that says public access and shared use of open space is strongly encouraged. And maybe that's language that can be tweaked to go back to find some terms that would encourage. Anyway, I don't have the answer tonight, I think, and I'm not talking about large amounts of open space. So I'm happy to move away from a percentage. But I do think something that gives a strong indication that we would like the public access and shared use of space is strongly encouraged. You know, for now, we'll leave it for that.
And I actually would like to take out strongly. I still, I think that is going to take out, and only because it's public access. I don't have a problem with saying open space is strongly encouraged, but having public access and shared use of open space is strongly encouraged. We're going to get a lot of pushback from that, and it's going to come, that's going to be an issue. You know, you have, for instance, Spotswood Echelon's talking about putting a dog park on the property, maybe having a little dog area. So are we going to have to allow all the neighbors to be able to use that work? And, you know, that's not right. I don't want to put strongly. I'm fine with saying encouraged, but
Well, flip it. You just gave a good, you just had it, Leslie. It's
strongly encourage open space.
Yeah, strongly encourage open space and where appropriate, public access and shared use.
That would be good. That would be great.
Yeah.
You got it.
I can't say it again, so it was only one time.
In the taking of in the minutes, Kate, I really love the expression you had after extended discussion. Then you condensed that, extended it, and then finally returning to the point at hand in the next paragraph. It's very good narrative technique. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you for indulging me on that open space. If I have another suggestion I think about, I will send you along some thoughts.
Were you going to hit density or?
Yes.
Does the comprehensive plan really say anything about density? I mean,
That's, I had the note in the margin is check.
okay.
Yeah, I don't know. Determine with reference to the comprehensive plan. So Arnie, do we have any reference? What's the reference to the comprehensive plan on density?
Don't recall anything off the top of my head.
Okay.
Where it says anything about density numbers,
Yeah, I didn't think so.
but I'll check.
But so then that goes back to the back and forth we've had on, do we want to note that maximum density? In the, do any of our matrices or charts have?
Well, reading how it is in here makes a little more sense than just reading this section from your notes. Shall be determined by the city with reference to the comprehensive plan. I don't know if that.
The reference, do the lot requirements have any influence on that, Arnie, or not? No, because it's R1, R2, RM, and RLC. Oh, there we go. C2, none. Lot with none. So there's a reference.
And then we saw the 3 acre minimum.
Mhm.
And it will be helpful on the application. It requires the list of differences from the underlying zoning. So you can see how much of a deviation the proposal is from the actual zoning, which I think is a helpful reference when evaluating.
Any thoughts on, I mean, that could work, Leslie. Any thoughts on minimum, maximum? Does anybody?
Maximum density?
Yeah.
I don't think we need to set that. I generally am under the impression that a lot of the time, I feel like a good goal of this type of development is to encourage higher densities than the normal, and higher housing densities are in that region. Yeah, I feel like that's a positive, but I guess without knowing what's exactly written in the comprehensive plan, but I sort of actually like the way it's written right now. The first paragraph.
Do we want to add Leslie's suggestion?
Well, it's already in there. I mean, it's under application for rezoning, the last narrative. Bullet point 8. That 420-5.13.
Which, can you give us a page reference?
Oh, sorry, page 5 of 8.
I see,
Yeah.
yeah.
So it's already included in there. And I just think that'll be help when
Okay,
evaluating.
all righty, thank you.
I think if we have, when we talked about building heights, if we're comfortable with the building height maximum, that will be a limiting factor. If we're saying we really are strongly encouraging basically a mixture of uses within a building, that also would cut down, because if you have more commercial uses in the ground floor, then you just have the rest of it for residential. I think that those are the checks on it, I think,
Yeah.
so that we don't just turn that whole area into a housing development. You know, there's got to be enough commercial uses. I think that would be the limiting factor on it not just being a residential development.
So just
Does that make sense?
following that, Pat, we're saying no open space requirement, no minimum, and then density is whatever you'd like. And that, and I am thinking of that mixed use district in Blacksburg that when we were looking at that, I went and looked for it on the map, the zoning map, and I found it. And when I turned on the aerial, I found it was just a parking lot and a big building. And when I called the planner, who is a former colleague of yours, Arnie, she's the one who said, well, be careful about using that zoning, because it didn't give us what we wanted. Basically, she said it's a big building with it doesn't relate to the site. I forget, it's a hotel or it's something big. So that's kind of like not what we would want on a 3-acre site, which is a big building and a parking lot.
Oh, honestly, we have a lot of those on Nelson Street right now. I mean,
Yeah.
Kroger, I know it's not residential. I would, well, sorry, I'll let you finish that though. Mention
that's it.
parking.
I just,
On parking, which is on page 5 of 8, we added that sentence from the Harrisonburg: off-street parking should not be located between the street and the front of the building facade and preferably sited to the rear of the building. I would suggest instead of that, sometimes we already have a lot of that. Sometimes we found this with Waddell, that's the best place for the parking. It's the only practical place for the parking. But if we reference some of the parking requirements from our site, that's already required when you do site plans in the entrance corridor. So looking back at our report for the Tesla charging stations under site plans, one of the comments or one of the requirements for parking is small landscaped interconnected parking lots rather than large central parking lots shall be encouraged. I kind of like the language that's already in our zoning within the entrance corridor for parking rather than just saying you can't park out front, because I don't think that's always very feasible. I like that, which was so on page 5 of 5 of the entrance corridor, section D, site planning. I liked 4 and also 5, parking lots shall not dominate the image of a site. Working language like that rather than just saying the other.
Yeah,
So is the proposal to remove that new language saying should not be located between the street and the front building facade and substitute that with the 2 sections that you just read from?
That would be my suggestion, yes.
Can you tell me what page you're talking about, your suggested language? Where is that?
Yeah, so.
On the site plan for
Yeah.
that? Oh. Okay, I'll look for it.
We've got several
I like that.
5 of 5s.
It's
And
hard.
it already actually applies to that zoning area anyway, since it's
Well, and then
C2's entrance. corridor.
number 3 there is also a good one.
Yeah, right. Mhm.
Yeah,
Would you like us to plug that in for next time? Take out that should and then put in those 3?
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. That's a good one. That's all I have, Chair, in my phone over today.
Okay, did you, so about 5 minutes ago, you sounded slightly discouraged about where we landed on the density and open space, but
I did, but I think we park it for tonight. We go with the language that we have based on the discussion. And if I have any other more specific thoughts and examples, I often try to think about this not from a regulatory side, but from a 3D side. What's it going to look like? What's it going to feel like? And that's, your example was a good one. And sometimes you can find language, and as Arnie and Kate have been doing, that from other jurisdictions that encourage that. I do wonder if we want any kind of density check, but I'll leave it for now. Thank you.
I like what Pat said was right, that when you're limited in your footprint and you're limited in your height, I guess that's sort of is gonna be a natural check on density, but everybody that I talk to with housing says that a higher housing density is usually a good thing for the in the big picture. But obviously I feel like with all these possible proposals that a potential developer could give, is they give us a plan and it says, okay, it's going to look like this. The building's going to be here. The parking is going to be there. And there's going to be a little small park there. And if it fits with the language that we've laid out, we basically have to sort of approve it as is, or do we still have any sort of flexibility to say, oh, we don't like the location of that that open space. We don't like the way that those parking lots are interconnected. Do we, I mean, as planning, does a planning commission ever have, do we have the ability to just make suggestions to the developer, if they are just very, very basically saying, well, you said it was strongly encouraged, but we couldn't make it work. And because it's not required, we just won't add this feature that you strongly encouraged.
It's an excellent question. Because, and we've wrestled with this before. And that's why I even was encouraging that language about at least a preliminary, you're encouraged to do a preliminary and presentation. A lot of it, actually, when you look, it falls to staff on these planned unit developments in your work with the developer. And you're the one as staff who can give a strong encouragement. And it's a delicate thing because of the proffer issues, as I understand, we've been taught. So, I mean, as an aside, when we got Sigma Nu, and this is what I was saying during the W&L time, when I said it's a fait accompli, we get a site plan and we've had nothing, we can't really say anything. They're not, at that point, it's a done deal. And so it really lies with staff to be able to say, yes, that's permitted. No, you're encouraged. You're encouraged to do this. Arnie, if you have any suggestions on how this is, I keep bringing this up and I don't have the answer about what would be a good, flexible, informative process. It's not one where we're trying to say, no, we don't like this or that. We don't like your brick color. It's more serious kind of design issues.
We have to be a little bit careful simply because we've already, as we're going through this sort of spectrum of comp plan, getting down to zoning ordinance, where we have more regulations, use and design standards, not so much requirements, but also some suggestions. And then by the time we get to site plan, there has to be some sort of, as we go through that continuum, where the developer has some sort of expectation that once he gets the site plan, if he meets, then he should be able to get his site plan approved. So I understand the desire for having some design input on that, but that really needs to either be in the zoning ordinance, in the land use criteria that we have by the time we get to site plan. And this is the one item where we have such sort of strict zoning districts, and how do we provide some relief to those? And that's why we're allowing something with a good bit more flexibility, which gets to the point of, can you make a recommendation against something because you strongly encourage, and they, for their own purposes, have some justification for why they didn't provide the open space or the whatever it is. You absolutely have the right to recommend, to say that's not, you didn't meet, and it's not really what you propose isn't completely, in my opinion, as a planning commissioner, meeting the intent, as I understand it, for what a PDMU is. So in that legislative decision that council ends up making, and you have the ability to make that recommendation, absolutely, you can say, yeah, most of it looks good, but my recommendation is going to be no, because you missed this opportunity for this specific item.
For this process, is the rezoning and site plan review all in one step?
So I keep saying in PDMU, you're basically getting a site plan, but it's actually two steps. So
Okay.
it's still going to be the rezoning to the PDMU district with a site plan to follow. There may still
Okay.
be some minor things or some other things that are more site plan issue oriented than.
Right.
So I may be leaning too much when I'm saying you're going to get site plan leveled.
Right. But that's
design.
perfect. I mean, I think that should alleviate your concern, John. I mean, people are not going to bring their plans up to us and say, design it. Let's take the W&L master plan. It was messy, but it went really well from an outside, from watching from the outside. They they did try a couple of years ago to have those Zoom conferences with both city council and planning. This is what we're presenting. Unfortunately, we didn't really know it came out of the blue and we weren't well prepared for it. We didn't, but they threw those out. But then the process itself, having the public hearing based on the comments from the public hearing and from planning commission on the rezoning, their plans have changed a lot. And then once they got back to coming back with the master plan or site plan process. So I think because this is still 2 steps, you will get that feedback. It's always going to be messy because they're probably not going to respond until there's a bit of outcry.
Well, as of tonight, I mean, at least we've included this notion of you're encouraged to do a preliminary plan. And you're right, maybe we do, and I'm encouraged by what you said, Arnie, and then, yes, that's what we did with WNL. I mean, so we did have a chance to say,
Yeah.
I mean, on page 7 of 8, the insertion Arnie has about using the language from the master plan process. The development shown on the master plan is in compliance, that the red insert is in compliance with the requirements of so that would be the MDX and other applicable provisions of this chapter, and that such development should not be detrimental to the health, and values. So I guess this is where you're saying we do have some latitude in our review process. Okay.
Great. I think let's move to public comment for this discussion. Is there any? Okay. Let's move to other business.
Just to wrap up that just quickly for direction, our intention is to bring this back to you at your next available meeting for one last review, and then perhaps, if it's okay with you at that point, to advertise not a public hearing, but maybe a work session. That's kind of what the indication was, I think, at the last meeting, is to have a work session first. But we'll bring it back. I just want to get that out on the record more than anything else. So if we'll just bring back the latest edition with the changes that you have tonight for your review at the next meeting, and then seek your direction following that.
Would it be helpful on the next version to give us the final language without the strikeouts and changes? I think just to get it whole.
I think so.
Yeah.
Okay, we can certainly do that. Or would you like to see the changes that you've done this evening in a strike through and underline version? In like 2 versions, full strike through and underline, even with what you have tonight, and then a second version that's just no strike through and underline with, I'm just wondering out loud if you want to just see that version with all the new language, or you still want one just to be able to go back and see what was strike through and underline. Am I confusing you?
No, I think I'm okay. I mean, we'll have the old packets available, so I don't think I need to see that, just the final.
Okay, sounds good. We'll give you in your next packet the up-to-date version with no strike through and underline, just straight language.
You know what would be helpful is the use matrix that John was suggesting. If I wouldn't send it tomorrow, if you could just wait and send it with the packet, so we remember or I remember to review it, so we can talk about that as well. I mean, I should remember tomorrow. Maybe I'll start looking at it tomorrow on my own, but
No, you're right.
Yeah.
Make it part of our
yeah.
normal process. So we don't,
Great. Thank you very much, everybody. Arnie, could we move on to other business? All right, other business, zoning and planning report.
We inspected a short-term rental on Carruthers Street and did not approve a registration because it is our opinion, my opinion as a zoning administrator, that the lessee is not a primary resident, and a letter was issued in that lessee has 30 days to appeal. Also mailed a notice of violation today to another owner on Carruthers Street for debris and junk in the yard. And we may be asking, actually, the manager's already tasked us and the legal department to change another section of code. Currently in 314, I can't remember the subsection, We have the ability to remove junk materials from a property, and also have the ability to contract somebody to mow grass on a property that's 10 inches in height or more, because that's the violation part, and then recover the cost for the mowing. But there's nothing about the recovering the cost of removing debris and taking it to the dump and paying the tipping fees. So there will likely be a amendment shortly before city council about amending the section 314, which is property maintenance, to recover costs for when we actually, if a person doesn't act in the period of time that they've been given to remove the junk, that we remove the junk and then recover our costs for that particular step. We had a second meeting yesterday with architects and engineers for WNL regarding the Williams School addition building. The first review, they didn't consider enough about access to the building for fire access, so for life safety. So a number of changes were made, and we had that second meeting, and it's a lot better addition than the first one, particularly for life safety. That is their primary project. I'm not sure that they ever gave us a prioritization other than the Williams School. And following that, we also received from WNL yesterday an application for a conditional use permit to allow Baker Dorm to go back to residential use. It's currently office or administrative use, if I remember correctly, and for
Overflow.
IT and
Baker, Davis's IT. Baker was always the overflow administrative offices. Plus it was for COVID, it was over, they were housing 6 students in there, but
and that was fine because that was an emergency. So at some point in the past, they had a conditional use permit to go from the Baker Davis residential use to this administrative use. And now they're asking to go back. And that may only be for a year or 2 maximum, because that building has to come down for the Williams School expansion building. You will see that it was advertised for the August 11th Planning Commission meeting. Again, that's just to change the use back to a residential or dorm use. The Central Shenandoah Planning District Commission scheduled 2 days for housing focus groups in sort of preparation or in part of the housing plan or study that's being conducted by the CSPDC. Those will be held August 24th and 25th at the BV Innovation Collective. That's all I have for a zoning report.
great. Thank you, Arnie. Are there any questions, or move on to Catalyst project updates, if there is any?
Just, thank you. A quick, Arnie, the question on the housing, is that part of the Lexington Rockbridge BV study?
It is. There's going to be a region-wide study, but they promised us to do our mini region first, which does include Rockbridge BV and Lexington. If I'm not mistaken, but I didn't really look at the entire invitee list or the list that they have started. I believe it is only Rockbridge, BV, and Lexington. So I think they're doing focus groups just for our portion of this overall housing study.
Is there a description of that, or can you, no? Okay, well, when you can tell us when
It's
we get
just
closer.
very at the beginning stages, and folks will start getting invites shortly, I presume, from the CSPDC for those focus groups.
All right. You guys want to talk about green infrastructure?
Yes, yeah. I think John asked Arnie to send this out ahead of time. I don't know if you had seen it, but we had our 8th Zoom meeting on June 28th to discuss the current working draft of the report that we'll submit to the Planning Commission and City Council. You saw there's a list of meetings and what we covered in each one as part of this. So the final report, we're going to have it broken into 4 sections: an executive summary and introduction, the activities, implementation, networking, and annexes. So we're going to emphasize the importance of the executive summary and introduction to synthesize the finding and recommendations. And if you're interested in more detail, then you can go into part 2 under the activities, which are organize the different green infrastructure strategies in the comprehensive plan under these activities: bike ped, urban green space, waterways, land use and development, health and recreation, climate change, resilience and sustainability. Section 3 on implementation and networking will highlight the numerous public, private, and nonprofit organizations and institutions already involved in green infrastructure related activities and suggest approaches for leveraging and linking these efforts. And we talked a lot about that in our last meeting and over the meetings and how we're going to try to kind of pull this all together, all the activities that are already going on to make the activities sustainable and in a way coordinated to get all of the work and energy that's already out there to be kind of moving in a clear direction. And then there'll be a section on potential resources and grants. So we're going to meet next month, right? And hopefully we're going to have a more complete draft and then get that draft submitted for review and consideration by the planning commission. Right.
Yeah, and the only addition, and it's to take some direction from Leslie, is I think what we will come up with is a draft that the planning commission and staff can look at. And then I was thinking about it today. I was thinking the process and that really it should be, I think it would be interesting for council to schedule a work session on it. And we have members of the working group present to council, not us, but members who are there and say, this is what in this area, this is where we think there's a priority. What do you think? And so in a way, it's not a plan per se, but also that council has a chance to weigh in on the priorities and what's important. So it's really becomes council's document, because at the end of the day, really, when people have asked Pat and I about this, our answer is, look, we did this as a catalyst project. It's kind of, as Blake said, it's a model of how we can activate that chapter. But really, the implementation of it's a handoff. It's not with the planning commission. It's with staff, it's with council. And also what's evident in our discussions with everybody is a lot of the green infrastructure work is spread among many different groups. It's not all this, it's not the city having to do everything. And I think that's what we're bringing out here is how to strengthen these coalitions, so it doesn't all fall on Arnie's shoulders to do the whole plan. That's not the point. So I think the more we can get council involved in thinking about that model and the approach, then I think it has a chance to move forward. So that's my, sorry, a long-winded question to you, but the gist of it is I think council we would really like to have council be part of the review process and not just like, here's the plan. Yes, we like this part, but really to get into it and say, we like this, we don't like that. We think you should emphasize other things.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, both for council and just for public information. I think it's the best way to get it out to the community, but I think that's a great idea.
Because as John said, almost as important as any of the specific things that we could suggest in the near term is in the long term is how is this work going to keep going? I think that's as important.
Someone so nicely said, if you just have a plan and you don't have a way to do it, it's like a truck with no wheels. So that's what we want to make sure we have wheels. Okay, thank you.
Thank you both for the update on green infrastructure. Do we need to touch on any key annual planning commission milestones? No? Okay. How about city council report?
Council met on Thursday, July 7th, and we reviewed an ordinance amending and clarifying the method by which the city compels the cutting of vegetation that obstructs streets and sidewalks. And a public hearing on the ordinance will be held at the July 21st meeting. So this is another ordinance that goes along hand in hand with the one Arnie was talking about regarding junk. And then council approved a resolution requested by Rockbridge County in support of their Smart Scale grant application for sidewalks along Route 11 north of Lexington from Greenhouse Road to College Square. There'll be portions on each side of 11. And that's all I have, unless there's any questions.
No, was there any, this is not city council specific, but the Freedom Food Festival, was that a success as far as,
Everybody has said that's a huge success.
that's-
Yeah.
that was a good
yeah.
win for the city as
Great.
far as the closing of the streets? That was
That and just the whole weekend of events was fabulous. But having the balloons, having the children's bike parade. I've heard nothing but great things. And from all the organizations that organized it as well, and
That was a great
community
party.
members.
cool. Yeah. Good job by all those organizations.
Yeah.
All right.
And George Yuji for
Mm-hmm.
kind of leading that.
All right. Without any more items on the agenda, I was wondering if there's a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
I
Look, well done.
Well done, Blake.
Yeah,
Welcome back,
inaugural.
Leslie.
I drunk with power yet?
All right, we're going back to 1 hour meetings.
We'll just talk faster.
Too fast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the vegetation, is it like when people